Okay. Well, good morning. We are out at the scene of a deputy-involved shooting in far north Bexar County. The information that we have is preliminary, but what we know at this point is that, first off, our deputy is okay. He has suffered some facial injuries that are going to require some stitches. Unfortunately, the suspect is dead on scene here. But what we were able to gather at this point is that this morning there were several calls for a disturbance. I believe we have at least 2 calls, one for a family disturbance and one for burglars in action. What we know is that this suspect came to this residence this morning and appeared to begin getting violent with family members that live in the home. I believe the family members just moved from out of state probably about 2 or 3 days ago, according to the neighbors. However, this suspect is known somewhat here in the neighborhood because they purchased the house a while back. Even though they just moved here, the suspect has been doing some work at the house. It appears as if he came to the house this morning to do some work, but things for some reason turned south fairly quickly, and it appears the suspect began to assault family members within the home. An off-duty officer, federal agent from nearby, went to try to confront the suspect, who he believed was armed with at least a knife. Confronted the suspect, and that off-duty agent was carrying a weapon himself. However, he did, I can tell you from having seen some preliminary surveillance camera video from neighbors, that agent showed an immense amount of restraint as he backed off the situation a bit and allowed the suspect some space. It appears in an effort to keep from using deadly force. At any rate, the neighbors kept calling us, and our deputy was able to arrive. As soon as you see the deputy arrive on scene, the patrol car pulls up and the suspect makes a beeline for the deputy. He appears to assault the deputy in the front of the residence. At that point, I can't tell you if he punched the deputy in the face or physically cut the deputy in the face with a knife, because the deputy's got both types of injuries to his face. There seems to be an exchange. The two break apart shortly. The deputy does try to tase the suspect, but was unsuccessful in doing so. The suspect attacked the deputy once again, and the deputy backpedaling. It appears that at that point the suspect begins swinging, but again, I can't tell if at that point he's punching or cutting with a knife. The deputy did suffer at least 2 lacerations to the face, from 2 knife wounds to the face, and then an impact injury to the other side of his face. That deputy backpedaled several feet before pulling his weapon and firing at least 2 or 3 times. That suspect was struck and was pronounced dead here on the scene. The deputy involved is an 8-year veteran of the sheriff's office, about a 5-year veteran on the law enforcement side of the house. It appears he worked in the jail for several years before crossing over to the other side. Thankfully, he's at the hospital. He is expected to be okay, but does have some facial injuries some injuries to his face that are most likely going to require stitches. The suspect in the case is a male. At this point, I was not able to determine his race, whether African American or white. He appears to be in his 20s or 30s. But again, he is dead here on scene, and we have recovered at least one weapon, edged weapon, a knife, that the deputy is seen kicking away as soon as the shot is fired, but it's been recovered. There is at least one family member of the suspect that does have some facial injuries. Both family members that were involved have been taken downtown for questioning. But at this point, preliminarily, it appears that all policies and procedures were complied with by the deputy, and of course, we're thankful that the federal agent that was involved in the situation is also okay and did not suffer any injuries either. Esta mañana nosotros recibimos una llamada por un tiroteo involucrando uno de nuestros oficiales. Nosotros recibimos varias llamadas para esta casa, donde se aparenta que el sospechoso intentó de entrar a la casa a fuerza, intentó de asaltar 2 familiares. Un agente federal que vive aquí en la vecindad se enfrentó con el sospechoso. El agente estaba armado, pero él no usó esa arma, sino que el sospechoso que se aparenta que estaba armado con una navaja, intentó de atacar al agente, pero el agente se separó de la escena y no usó fuerza contra el sospechoso. Cuando llegó la patrulla, el oficial se bajó del carro de patrulla y se aparenta que el sospechoso atacó al oficial físicamente. En esos momentos se ve en video, yo logré ver video de un vecino donde se aparenta que el sospechoso atacó al oficial. No se sabe si le pegó con la mano o si lo cortó con una navaja. El oficial tiene los dos tipos de heridas en la cara, pero en ese momento no se sabe qué usó el sospechoso. Se separaron los dos. El oficial intentó de tumbar al sospechoso con una pistola electrónica, pero no tuvo éxito en eso, sino que el sospechoso atacó al oficial otra vez, lo cortó en la cara con la navaja y el oficial iba separándose, iba corriendo atrás para separarse del sospechoso, pero el sospechoso desafortunadamente intentó seguir atacándolo. El oficial disparó cuando menos 2 o 3 veces. El sospechoso fue baleado y falleció aquí en la escena de los hechos. Hay 2 familiares del sospechoso que ellos también fueron atacados por el sospechoso. Cuando menos uno de ellos, una mujer, tiene heridas a su cara. El oficial tiene 8 años de ser diputado con nuestra agencia, 5 años de esos en patrulla. El sospechoso pensamos que es un hombre en sus 20s o 30s, pero no sé la raza del sospechoso en estos momentos. Any questions?
So the suspect was a person who was already here in San Antonio, or they moved from out of state as well?
So my understanding is that the suspect is local and has family already living here. The family members that live in the house just moved here from out of state, but they've owned my understanding is they bought the house several months ago. This suspect may have been involved in fixing the house up for them to arrive, but they just arrived a few days ago to the neighborhood.
You say federal agent. What agency can you tell us?
I believe it's a DEA agent.
And he was off duty.
Yes, sir. Very, quite frankly, eerily similar situation to the last deputy-involved shooting that we had. Domestic violence call for service, and in that instance, an off-duty DEA agent that was living nearby helped us out with that one as well. So certainly owe a huge debt of gratitude to DEA for both of these situations. Thankfully, in neither situation were their agents hurt. But again, here's off-duty first responders doing what we should absolutely be doing, is getting involved to save lives.
Have you seen a lot more family violence, domestic?
Yes, sir. To answer your question, I have seen an uptick in domestic violence scenarios. Obviously, with these last 2 having turned turning deadly almost immediately upon arrival of the deputies, it just goes to show that it seems to me that the violence is escalating. Although I don't have facts and figures in front of me, anecdotally speaking, I can tell you it does seem like these things are on the uptick. And unfortunately for us, the last 2 have turned out deadly for us.
As sheriff, what do you say to people that have family issues? What can they do?
So, from my understanding, although the victims at the house that were assaulted, there's I think one's a sibling, and then of course a sibling-in-law of this suspect. And my understanding is that, if I'm hearing correctly, that this suspect has sort of a family history of being problematic. So I mean, look, it's one thing to be able to say, separate yourself from that situation. If you're a victim of domestic violence, you should absolutely try to get yourself out of that situation as soon as possible. Because in most cases, right, there's an exception, there's always an exception, but in most cases, domestic violence is an escalating situation. In other words, it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse until the point that somebody dies, or at least there's an intent to take someone's life. It's a bit harder when that person is your sibling. You're not in a married situation with that person, but you should still do your best to try to avoid contact if you can. I know it's easier said than done when it comes to a family member, but obviously we need to try to avoid problems whenever they start to develop.
The family victims that were involved, if you could repeat that again, were they taken to a hospital? How old were they? Was it a woman and a man?
It's a man and a woman that live in the home. It is a married couple. I believe they're a married couple. I didn't get their ages, but they appear to be in their 20s or 30s, probably their 30s. One of them is a sibling to the suspect. So obviously the other one's an in-law. And they were not, although I believe the woman has some facial injuries from having been punched. I think she is actually being questioned. I think EMS treated her here on scene, but I don't think so. Thankfully, she did not have to go to the hospital. And then the man was just transported by patrol a few minutes ago to be questioned by us. I don't think he was injured. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank y'all so much for coming out with us.
What time did this start?
I believe about 7:30 is when we started getting calls on it, but we'd have to narrow that down for you just a bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.